It really is just coming down to recognizing it, validating it, and realizing that it's a stress response and that it's natural and this is the way that God created us to be. And then asking God to shine his light on it and expose anything that's in the darkness so that the enemy can no longer use it against us.
Have you felt like you're just in this place of maybe survival or just in this place of reactions? Like you don't really know why you want to change your actions, but it just feels like you're reacting to everything. Listen, I've been there. I totally get it. And recently, the Lord has been showing me some things about the nervous system. And so today, I have someone with me who is going to share a little of her story with that and how maybe faith and nervous system actually go together to bring that healing. And so I'm really excited to have her here. I'm going to be asking the questions that I wish I would have had the answers to 3 months ago. And so you're going to want to listen in because I just know that this is going to be an amazing conversation.
If you're frustrated being a spiritual leader of your home and struggle to find time with God and want simple steps to deepen your connection with Him, create unity in your family, and raise bold, faith-filled kids, you're in the right place. Hey, I'm Alyssa, wife, mom of 3, and revivalist. After 10 years of fervently praying, I saw my husband encounter God, come into salvation, and give his life to Christ through baptism. That's when I discovered the secret to seeing your family walk with Jesus and experience intimacy with God. Daily prayer. If you're ready to break generational curses, seek God more, and hear from the Holy Spirit more clearly, take a deep breath, Mama, because we're about to step into the adventure of letting God lead.
All right, mamas, welcome back to Letting God Lead. I am so excited to introduce to you today Miss Amy Wadlington. She is a prophetic Christian life coach, speaker, and the host of a top 2.5% globally ranked podcast called Prophetic Breakthrough for Christian Women. After walking through wilderness seasons marked by career loss, chronic illness, financial hardship, and spiritual exhaustion, Amy discovered firsthand the power of renewing the mind, regulating the nervous system, and partnering with God through every season. Today, Amy equips women to help them break free from fear, imposter syndrome, confusion, and survival mode. So that they can step boldly into their calling with clarity, confidence, and peace. Through her signature frameworks, biblical teaching, and hearing God clearly, she helps you to overcome the mental blocks holding you back and step into the breakthrough that you've been longing for. Her work is known for being refreshing, practical, and deeply spirit-led, rooted in truth and anchored in hope. So, Amy, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. This is going to be so good.
Oh, I agree. Kind of like what I said in the teaser, over the last few months, God has been leading me kind of into this and just showing me how He is resetting my nervous system, which, I kind of heard it and kind of thought like, oh, it's a buzzword, never really recognizing what state my nervous system was in, or even where it came into play, and until God started to kind of reveal it to me. And so I would love, first of all, for you to share a little bit about how God led you to this, kind of walked you through that same healing and brought in the nervous system with it and all those things. I would just love to hear kind of the backstory of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we always say that God works all things together for our good and for those who love Him and are called according to His purposes. And I've always held on to that knowledge, knowing that He does work all things together for good. And when my oldest daughter, who's now 24, when she was about 5 years old, she came to me and told me that somebody in our family had been sexually abusing her. And it was a shock because it was somebody that we loved and trusted. And we started the process of going to counseling for her. And while she was in her counseling sessions, her therapist had me listening to parenting CDs. It was back when Walkman were actually a thing.
Yes.
And so I was listening to these CDs about how to parent a child who has been through trauma. And I learned about the nervous system and regulation and how to help her stay in a regulated state, what to do when she's dysregulated, and what happens when a child is misbehaving who has had a traumatic background, that it's not misbehaving, that is, they're either coming from a place of fear or they're coming from a place of love. And so if they're in a state of fear, then they are dysregulated. They're going to misbehave. They're going to have more tantrums. They have trouble sleeping, all of these different things that are going to happen to a child who has been through this. And then if they're in a state of love, then it's more of the rest and digest state where they're at peace and they're happy and they're playing. And a lot of it comes out in their play. And you can see like the fear come out in their play, or you can see the love come out in their play. And she went through play therapy. And then as she got older, we went to equine therapy and I learned more about the nervous system. And I never put it together that it was something that I also had to deal with because
Wow.
I thought, I'd never been through trauma. Well, when your child has been traumatized, you've been traumatized. There's secondary
Yeah.
traumatization, but there's also life. And so many people think, well, I've never had a big T trauma. I wasn't abused as a child, or I was never raped or held at gunpoint in a robbery. I was never a war veteran. So I don't have PTSD. I don't have trauma. Well, really, that's not true because 50% of American parents divorce. And so that's traumatic for a child. Not receiving the type of love that our individual needs are as a child can be traumatic, even though we have loving, caring parents that loved us dearly and raised us wonderfully and still love us to this day. That can still be traumatic in our body. It's a physical trauma. And then if you just forget all of that and just say 2020 was a global traumatic event,
Yes.
that there were people who lost their jobs, there were people who
Yeah.
got sick, there was a lot of fear. We lost trust in all of the big, like the government,
Yeah.
doctors, education. There was a lot of broken trust. If a spouse cheats on you, there's so many different things that happen that can break uh, inside of us the perfect what God had intended for us, for Adam and Eve in the garden. That so a lot of people who say they don't have trauma, they do, and we still have a nervous system that can get dysregulated whether you have trauma or not. And so I started realizing that I was dysregulated and I have several issues with my health, three autoimmune diseases and Epstein-Barr virus. And I've done everything that I can possibly think of to heal myself and fix myself over the years of, removing toxins from my home and doing all these things. And then I realized that stress was my trigger for
Wow.
illness. And every time I was stressed, I would get dysregulated and then I would get sick and I would have a flare. And I realized that it was my own nervous system. And so I started going back to what did I learn to help my daughter regulate? And it was basically just validation. Like, when she was dysregulated, it was, you know what, if I was dealing with the things that you're dealing with right now, I would be stressed too, or I would be afraid, whatever it is that they're dealing with and using their language. And so you do that with yourself. Like, it's normal for me to be reacting this way because, if my best friend was reacting this way, what would I say to her? And just validating that our feelings and our emotions are normal, that they're God-given, and allowing yourself to breathe and feel that emotion and letting it release, and knowing that God gave us examples throughout the Bible of how to regulate ourselves. He showed Elijah when Elijah had been through a traumatic event in Second Kings. He went and defeated all of Jezebel's army. And then he ran away out of fear because he was terrified for his life. So he was in a stress response. Our stress responses are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We all have one that is more likely or more common for us to use. And so his was flight. He ran and he hid. And God sent an angel to him to comfort him. He gave him food and he allowed him to rest and to nap. And then when he woke up, he gave him more food and told him to rest some more. And so it was God shows us through example of what to do when we're in a stress response and how to regulate ourselves. And he sends his angels to comfort us as well. And so that is how I've kind of brought the faith and the nervous system together, is seeing the examples throughout the word, how he does it.
Mm. I'm so happy that you jumped into the how the nervous system and faith line up with that story, because I know that is something that many people may ask and wonder, because we can get so focused in on the spiritual side or so focused in on the physical side, but where does it connect and how does it connect? And so that is such just a great point and a great story in the Bible of God showing us. I know that sometimes this is going to happen, and here is what I would like for you to do.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I think too, and I'd love your input on, is I always think like he created us. He knew that he made us like this way with this nervous system, and that, he brings us wisdom and understanding and knowledge. And so we can, when we learn something like this, we can kind of start to lean into it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, he knit us together in our mother's womb. He knows how we were made. He created us each individually and wonderfully and beautifully. And he gave us a soul, which is our emotions and the our heart and who makes us who we are, our personality. And then he also made us a physical body. Our physical body, its job is to keep us alive. It's not to feel anything or to have emotions or anything like that. We can feel emotions physically, but our job, our body's job, and our brain's job, our nervous system's job is to make sure that we survive and that we continue on surviving generation after generation. And so our brain and our body's response to stress is just we have to make sure that this body is safe and that it's going to be kept alive. And so
Yeah.
when we have to give ourselves a lot of grace, because when we're thinking that we're overreacting, or if we're self-sabotaging, or we're doing the things procrastinating, or when, like Elijah, when he ran away, when we're avoiding, we're scrolling on
Yeah.
our phone. That's how we run
Yeah.
away in today's world.
Yeah.
We're doing all these things. If we give ourselves grace, knowing why is my body trying to keep me alive? What about this situation feels unsafe? And knowing that, okay, I'm safe, I'm okay. And reminding yourself that, validating those feelings again, and knowing that we are a full body made of spirit, soul, and body. And so our body and our brain need to be told that we're safe. Our emotions
Yes.
need to be calmed down and regulated, but also just breathing, because the physiology part of it is physically resting, physically eating, and telling our body we're safe. So if you think back to times when humans lived in a cave and they were being chased by a bear, they were in a cave. They weren't sleeping, because if they were sleeping, then they weren't on high alert. So their cortisol rises to keep them awake. And they're not eating because they're in a cave. There's no vegetables or fruit or berries that they can pick or anything they can hunt. So they're not eating. So their digestion system slows down. And so they're stuck in this cave. They're in high alert. They're not sleeping. And if you think about today's world, when we're on high alert, our cortisol is rising,
Yeah.
and we're not digesting food because our digestion system slows
Mm.
down to keep us alive. All of these physical things, the way that God made us, our body is working perfectly. We're
Mm.
just living in a fallen world. And so our body is doing what it's supposed to be doing, but we're not sleeping well because our cortisol is high. We're not digesting our food well, so we're having gut issues. We're gaining weight because we're eating even though our body has slowed down because the cortisol is high, saying we can't eat because we're trying to stay alive, but we're eating anyway. So it's storing as
Mm.
fat because it's like, oh, we've got to hold on to this. We've got to hold
Yeah.
on to these calories because we don't know how long we're going to be stuck in this cave. So our body is doing exactly what God
Mm.
created it to do. We just live in this fallen world, and we have to remember that if we're in a regulated, rested state, and God shows us how to do that throughout the word, then our body can rest, we can sleep well, we can digest, our hormones become more balanced. And so it all works together. And he is a perfect example of how he made us perfectly. We just, like I said, live in a fallen world. So,
Yeah. That's really, it's amazing to me. And one of my questions I wanted to ask, like, how do we start to recognize, these things, or how can we recognize if we're dysregulated, or what things should we be looking for? Um, but also, it kind of sounds like we all probably, I mean, we all get dysregulated at some point. And so these skills, are something that all of us should probably have no matter what, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, that's really amazing. And I love that you said, recently I had this um, something happen, and I was just sitting in my chair in my living room. And even just the thought of doing what I was going to do, my heart rate started to increase. I started to like almost have trouble kind of breathing, and my body just like felt super tense. And it was so amazing because in that moment, the Lord started to bring awareness
Mhm.
to he brought awareness to, okay, you're thinking about this thing. This is how your body is reacting because maybe of that trauma, whether, like you said, big T trauma, little T trauma, whatever it was that happened, when I was younger, and he connected it. And this, now your body's reacting in this way. And so I did what you said, like I literally told my body, my brain, my body, you're safe. It's okay. Breathe, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and so that was really, really amazing to me. And I would love to know, just from your perspective too, what what are some ways that maybe we can recognize this? Maybe that had showed up for you. I just kind of shared what had shown up for me, but maybe for you, so that we can start to kind of recognize, okay, maybe this is something that I get to do right now, or this is what's happening.
Right. Today's buzzword is triggers. And there's a lot of people that say, that triggered me. And so we don't want to use triggers as an excuse, but as an awareness of, okay, that triggered me. That was something that uh, that alerted my body that we're not in a safe place, but I'm in a safe place. So you start questioning it without any judgment, without any shame, without any fear, just giving yourself grace and being like, what happened there? And realizing that that trigger is an alert to an unhealed part of our soul.
Mm,
And so there's a wound there that needs healing, and God is shining his light on it. And sometimes it's just, you know, I always say that raising teenagers will expose all of your unhealed parts. Because it
oh,
was when I went through the teenage years with both of my daughters, it was trigger after trigger after trigger, the
wow.
overreaction of when they talk back to you. How do you react to that? What is the trigger that did that? And it's like, okay, she just slammed her door shut, and my first reaction was, don't slam doors in my house. And then I get angry, and my heart, my chest gets tight and my stomach gets tight and I get angry and all of this stuff comes up. Where is that coming from? And then you
Mm,
go back to your teenage years and you realize, that was something that caused extreme anger in my parent,
mm,
or, uh, and that stirred up a lot of fear and feelings. And then also realizing that your stress response can trigger somebody else's stress response. And so we can be triggered by somebody else's triggers. And it's becomes like this thing that you're living in a household, and if you're married, your stress response might be triggering your spouse, and your teenagers or your children might be triggering each other. And so realizing that all of these triggers are just unhealed parts that God wants us to be healed in. And so if your stress response is freeze or flight, and you are married to a person whose stress response is fight,
Mm.
and you're trying to run away and they're trying to fight for survival, and
Yeah.
you're trying to run away for survival, you're triggering each other in that moment. So realizing what your children's stress response is, and what your stress response is, and what your spouse's stress response is really important, because you can trigger each other and expose all of our unhealed wounds.
Yes. Wow. Isn't that true? I'm just thinking about, for me, one of them with when my children start yelling, or like if there's a lot of noise and then one starts crying loudly, I instantly like go into this like reaction of yelling, I'm like, oh no, stop. This is not helping, but
Right.
it's recognizing that. And so that whole, it's so true, just living with different people. And I never really thought to think about, okay, how do they respond? What is their, fight, flight, freeze, fawn? What are they operating in? So that we can kind of be more aware of that. So what would you say, and maybe you already touched on it, I'm not sure, but what's one shift that helps us come out of survival mode so that we can step into that peace and clarity? Because of course we already know we have these triggers, as we like to call them. But what do we do about it? Like, how do we actually step into that peace?
It really is just coming down to recognizing it, validating it, and realizing that it's a stress response and that it's natural, and this is the way that God created us to be. And then asking God to shine his light on it and expose anything that's in the darkness, so
Mhm.
that the enemy can no longer use it against us. And our body doesn't need to be in survival mode, just letting our body know that it's safe. And that is through somatics like breathing. You can breathe, grounding yourself, taking your socks and shoes off and going outside and putting your feet in the dirt or on the grass, making sure that you're getting enough rest, and real rest, not just
Yeah.
sitting in front of the TV binge watching a
Right.
show, yeah, show after show after show, but actually resting in the Lord and spending time with Him. Worshiping is a great way to regulate your nervous system, and just really realizing and being aware of what's happening and that you are in that stress response. And then the other side of that, when you start healing, is realizing that sometimes we do try to self-sabotage because we've lived in this high stress for
Mm,
so long, that when we are in a peaceful place, then we start getting bored,
yeah.
and we start sabotaging the
Yeah.
peace, and we start saying, well, this is boring, life is so boring right now, and then we create our own
Mm,
chaos. And sometimes that chaos that we create is in our own mind through fear. Sometimes it's the enemy coming against us, so we have to do spiritual warfare and cover
yeah.
ourselves with the blood of Jesus and take every thought captive and renew our minds. But sometimes it's just our body saying, life is really boring right now. Let's create some chaos. Because we've been in this high stress
Yeah.
situation for so long. And boredom is actually safety. And
Mm,
safety sometimes feels boring when you've been in a high stress place for all of your life since you were a child.
yeah. Wow. I've noticed, and I'm going to say it a little bit differently, but it has felt a little disorienting. I told my husband, I was like, I feel disoriented because one, I acknowledged some things that were hard for me to acknowledge. Of like, oh, this is how I've been living. This is the mindset that I have. This is the thought processes that have been built in me. Like, and it starts to almost feel disorienting because I believe God is well, he's bringing those things to light and he's healing them and he's bringing me into that peace and that unity. And so he's bringing me into that peace in a minute, okay? He's bringing me into that peace and that unity almost with myself. And it kind of feels disorienting because I'm like, what is this? What is this new world? You know?
Right. Yes. Yeah. It is disorienting. And sometimes it's enlightening too, and not in a new age weird way, but
Right.
where you realize, wow, I've been living like this for so long. And speaking of teenagers exposing our unhealed wounds, I remember when my youngest teenager, I call her the negotiator because she negotiates everything. She's going to be a great CEO someday.
I love it.
But she would always come back to me when my answer would be no. She would ask me a question and I would say no, and then she would push and push and push until I was in the bathroom with the door closed, crying because my child doesn't listen to me. She's rebelling. Then my thoughts would spiral into all of these fear, like she's going to end up in prison and doing drugs and pregnant as a teenager because
Right.
she doesn't listen to me when I say no. So I
Yeah.
would spiral out of control in my thoughts. And uh, I asked God one time when I was in the bathroom crying, trying to figure out why this is so hard. Why won't she
Mm,
listen to me when I tell her no? And why am I reacting this way?
mm.
Instead of saying, why is she doing this? I changed the
Oh,
focus
wow.
of why am I reacting this way? And when I
Yeah.
prayed that, God
Mm,
told me that He brought me back to a time in my life when I was married in an abusive relationship. And I didn't have a voice in that relationship.
oh,
And so when I would say no, it didn't matter.
mm,
I had no voice in that relationship. And so me saying no to my teenager, she was just
wow.
being a teenager. She was not doing
Yeah.
anything out of character or being mean or rude or anything like
Yeah.
that. I was reacting the way that I was because it was bringing me back and my body back to a time when it
Mm,
wasn't safe to say no.
wow.
And so asking God to heal that and then
Mm,
setting boundaries with my daughter and expressing to her, this was my overreaction
yeah.
to something that happened to me in my past. And so the way that I reacted was not your fault, and explaining
Mm,
that to her. But I need you to know that when I say no, no means no.
yeah.
However, if I respond too quickly and not think about my answer before I give it to you, you have my permission to say, do you really mean no, or are you just saying no because you don't want because you don't want to give me a ride or whatever? And so I gave her permission to come back at me, but to not keep pushing and not do
Right.
the things that she was doing before. So being sure to set boundaries around that so
Yeah.
that I could start to regulate my body and
Mm,
know that when I do say no, it means no, and
yeah.
knowing that I have a voice. And so that actually strengthened our relationship because I
Mm,
communicated with her instead of just getting angry and
yeah.
going into the bathroom and crying, which she probably thought I lost my mind. Why is mom in the bathroom crying?
Right.
Because all I
Oh,
did was say, can I go somewhere? And she said no. And then I said, please, please, please,
yeah.
please, 100
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
she was just being a teenager
Yeah.
of what, she wasn't doing anything wrong, but she was exposing that unhealed wound
Mm,
in me. And then
mm,
God used that to not only heal that part of me and in my past, but also to strengthen our relationship.
mm.
So he's really good.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Amy, I just thank you for sharing all of your stories, and also just being vulnerable in that and sharing with us what the steps that we can start to take and the things that we can start to do. Because I know that this, even just if they take a couple of the things, it's going to help so much. And it's what I would have been looking for even 3 months ago, even now. Like that's why I was so excited to talk to you about this. And so I know that the women listening, they're like, okay, I think this is the step that I need to take. And I would love to connect with Amy or listen to her podcast and stuff like that. Can you tell them where to go so that they can connect with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find me on my podcast at Prophetic Breakthrough for Christian Women. And I have a group that is on Facebook, and it's Christian or life coaching for Christian women as well. And you can find me on my website, which is amywadlington.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. And I think that you also had like a gift to give them, the thought detox. Is that right? Would you like to share a little bit about
Yes.
that?
Yep, they can go to my website at amywadlington.com to get the thought detox, and it basically just takes you through 3 days of releasing all of the thoughts that they have through prayer and journaling. It's really important to journal out your prayers because it's going to help bring those to light, and so that 3-day thought detox is a great way to get started on changing your mindset and changing how you think so that you can regulate your body.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. It was such a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey Mama, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who may want more intimacy with God and struggles with being a spiritual leader of her home? Also, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. It encourages me to know this podcast is helping you. Off I go to ignore my to-do list for 15 minutes and get into God's Word. I'll meet you back here in just a couple of days for another episode, because when you let God lead, you're never alone.